All right, so today we're going to talk briefly about reamping. We'll talk about reamping with real amps as well as software emulation. All right, so today for reamping with real amps, I don't have a bunch of amps or cameras to show you reamping real amps, but I do have a Kemper profiler here, which is a hardware rack unit amp simulator. That profiles or creates presets off of real amplifiers, off of analyzing real amplifiers and speakers. And it does require an analog out of the DAW through the audio interface and back in to record it. So it has to be signal flow connected the same way as an amplifier. All right, so let's talk about reamping. So the concept of reamping is to redo or replace the tone of an instrument initially captured. A couple of situations you might have gotten the guitar performance but did not like the tone. Well, great, you got the DI recorded, you can reamp it. The sky's the limit on what kind of tone you can get from that performance after the fact. Or, a lot of the cool things you can do with this is that you can reamp it and have, 3, 4, as many tracks as you want of reamped performances of the same performance. So you can blend them together and create tone qualities and all that junk that you couldn't get with just because you can't afford to have 10 amplifiers that are amazing amps in a room. You can just do them all one at a time and layer them and blend them and tweak them and do what you need. So you can blend it with the original or just totally replace the original. Any instrument that technically can be DI'd can be sent through a reamping process. We're just going to talk about bass and guitar, but keys and synths and anything, as an effect, you could go crazy. Just be careful sending really loud line level things into guitar amps. They might not be expecting that in the inputs. All right, so what's going on? Well, really, sending something through an amplifier and a speaker cabinet and then through a mic and a preamp is about distortion. It's about the coloration of that distortion to get it to be the sound that fits the song you're working. It doesn't need to be dark and gritty. It doesn't need to be very clean, really snappy and bright. You would accomplish these things via a combination of the guitar, of course, through different amplifiers and different speakers, and then different microphones, different preamps. There's a lot of factors. We'll go down the chain in just a second. So first of all, the analog circuitry of a preamp. The design of the preamp itself creates a quality, a distortion quality, a tonal quality to what the guitar's inputting. Then you have the speaker. So after the amplifier, the output of that goes into a speaker to be reproduced. Different speakers distort in different ways, at different levels, and create, a totally different tone to what's coming out of the amplifier. So the combination of an amplifier and its speaker is a really important thing that if you talk to any really good guitarist that loves dorking out on their equipment, they'll talk to you about amplifier and speaker combinations a lot. Then you have your microphone, and there's a million choices. Everybody will tell you a different choice of microphone to use depending on what amp and what speaker. And then the preamp it goes through. So right there you have the circuitry, the speaker, the microphone, the preamp, all together adding up to create the tone. You can, with reamping, eliminate some of these. I mean, if you're simulating, you don't need to go through a speaker. You could just simulate the amplifier. If you're going through a real amp, though, you'll have to go through this process, usually. All right. So through amps, you'll have to have an analog output from your DAW that then will enter into the amplifier so it can play out to the speaker, and then you have a microphone that picks it up, sends it through a preamp, and back into your audio interface to record onto a new track, just like if you were recording guitars that was playing live. It's pretty straightforward. There's not really too much to it. Pedal boards, remember that usually a guitarist or bassist has the pedal boards happen before the amplifier. Their guitar plugs directly into the input of the pedal board. Then the output of the pedal board, after it goes through all the pedals they have, goes into the amplifier. So that the amplifier can then amplify and affect all the stuff they're doing with their effects. There's no rule that says that it has to go before or after the amp or anything. That's just usually how guitarists and bassists do it. It's usually how they get the effects they want to sound the way they want. Again, when reamping, you can experiment and you can put things in any order as long as you are safe and don't blow amps up or microphones or preamps or whatever. And if you're software emulating, you can change the order of everything in any way you want. So just be creative. Just wanted to let you know, if you don't play guitar bass, usually the pedal boards are before the amplifier, directly after the guitar. All right, so here's a brief little signal flow chart. You have your DAW out of your outer interface and analog out, which then comes out and needs to go to the pedal board. Sometimes, not always, you could use a reamp box. It looks similar to a DI. What this does is a guitar output is usually a high impedance, unbalanced signal. A reamp box can take the DAW out, which is usually a balanced signal, and it could be low impedance. It is a lot of the time. And it readjusts it back to be a high impedance, unbalanced signal, just like an amplifier is expecting from an actual guitar. It also can make sure there's no grounding issues between an unbalanced and a balanced connection and all that, in case there's a problem. You don't necessarily have to. Some amps won't hate it if you just send an analog out of your DAW directly into it, but you can Google and figure out, and if you're looking for gear, what a reamp box does and which ones are great. We don't have to go too deeply into that right now. Then, whatever way you get out of your reamp box or directly out of DAW, you go to the pedal board and effects, then to the amp, then to the mic, picks it up through the preamp, goes into your DAW directly. Or you can, if you have a nice studio and you got some awesome studio tools, you got some nice compressors and EQs, whatever, just like if you were recording guitar live, you can add those in. And it goes back in your DAW. All right. So outboard amp modelers operate the same way as a real amp. They have inputs, analog inputs and outputs, some digital, so you might not even need to do an output. But they usually, like this Kemper here I have a picture of, this is what I have in the room, has multiple inputs. It has a high impedance input, for a guitar to plug directly in, but it also has, line level balanced inputs and all varieties. So I can actually take the output of my interface directly into this thing, as long as I use the right input, and it's fine. I don't need a reamp box. All right, so these create profiles or presets, I guess you could call it, of real amplifiers. There's a whole process that you can learn with these to analyze amplifiers and create that profile, so that then you can emulate that exact, or as exact as possible, amplifier without having to have that amplifier. It also does speakers, so it's kind of an amplifier and speaker combination. You can profile either in combination or individually, add them together. It has, I think, on this one, 4 spots for stomp boxes or pedal board effects with a bunch of built-in effects, as well as EQ and compression and other things like that. But it still needs an output, and it has to send back to the DAW just like an amplifier. All right, then there's software modeling. So this is Native Instruments Guitar Rig. It's the one that I use and I'm familiar with. And it does the same thing as that profiler in a way. What it does is you can choose from a variety of emulations of popular amp heads or amplifiers and cabinets. They can be matched. You can mix and match them. It also has a whole bunch, as you can see here, of components. So you can create whole pedal board setups, whole chains of effects and processing, all kinds of stuff that, if you don't have the money to buy all the pedals and all that, the sky's the limit. You can keep adding them and adding them. The one thing with Guitar Rig, and I'm not sure, but maybe with other guitar emulators, is it can add up really fast to the processing your computer has to do. So if you have multiple instances of Guitar Rig and you're going to town with effects and emulation, you can actually slam your computer pretty hard processing wise. I've done it a bit much. I had a session with lots of guitars, lots of synths, and I was using Guitar Rig to build pedal boards and pedal effects and just create crazy tones, and pretty soon I had my software crashing. You can always freeze tracks or print things if you need to, but pretty flexible. All right, so let's get on to the actual demonstration. So up here I have the session we recorded in class. Here's the bass DI and the guitar DI. I hit everything else so that we will only, be seeing and hearing these two things. Bass DI is used a lot as a straight DI. Bass doesn't sound too bad as a DI, depending on the bass and the bassist. Guitar, electric guitar, not so much. It doesn't sound that great without an amplifier. You can hear that. It's a little too revealing. You can hear every little, intricacy of the guitarist in good and bad ways. All right, so first let's talk about sending out to real amplifiers. I'm going to use this Kemper. So it needs an analog input and it has to output an analog output. So I have to use an output of my interface and an input to bring it back in. I just, for this example, used output 8 and input 8. I have a Orion 32, an Antelope Orion 32, which means that I have 32 ins and 32 outs. I picked 8. It's on the first 8 chain. It's the last one on the snake I have for the first 8 outputs. And I picked input 8 just to keep them nice and, in and out. I know 8 is my Kemper. There's a couple ways to do this. The first way is to actually send this DI track out, output 8. Then I will need to create a mono, because DI is just a mono track, and make the input 8. So it's listening back in. I'll get it ready. You can hear. Now this sounds like it's going through an amp. I just have a random preset on the amp for what profile I'm using up, but definitely different than the straight DI. All right, so I can just hit record, and guess what? I'm recording what that Kemper profiler is putting out. And then once I get the performance, if this was in theory the tone I wanted, I recorded it. Now I got it. I captured it. All right, and then you can always create a new track and do Kemper amp 2. Record, enable that one, and then record another tone. Make sure it's always 8. I'm using 8. And then record like a whole nother profile and blend, to create 5 different overlays of it to blend together to a big sound. That's cool. It's a little extra work compared to using what's called a hardware insert. So since I used output 8 and input 8, I can use what's called a hardware insert in Pro Tools. And what it is on an insert slot on a track, I can go down here instead of plug into I/O, and I can use a hardware insert on a input-output pair. In Pro Tools, your output and input for a hardware insert must be the same number. So seeing as I'm using output 8 to get to the Kemper, I need to use input 8 to get back. Pro Tools will marry these two together in the form of a hardware insert. So I will pick insert 8. So here it says insert 8 on a plug-in slot. So right now I can hit play, and I'm getting that Kemper again. But I didn't have to create a track. It's just putting it right on my track, just like a plug-in. It's going in and out. Cool. This is something you can do live, and you can tweak the amp, and, you could mix this way and just have it real-time processing. That's cool. But you might want to print it just for the sake of, that way you don't have to, if you need to come back and recall things and whatnot, it's less headache. So this is the way I might do it. I would create a software insert, and then I would create, let's say I want to layer like 4 different Kemper amps. Here's Kemper amp 1. What I'm going to do is use bus 1, and then I will just route this to bus 1. So I can record enable it and go ahead and go, sweet. Here's my first profile, and I want to layer a few amps. Bam, there you go. Then I'm going to go down to my next one. And I'm going to toy with some tones to blend with this. So I'm going to play it and go to my profile library. I like that one. So now I'm going to layer that. Sweet. And then I'm going to go down to my next one. And I'm going to record enable it. And I'm going to go to a new one. Cool, I like that. I'm going to record it. And there you go. You know, you could just keep going, and layering. I would definitely put more thought into what tones I'm doing and tweak things to get it perfect. But you can really quickly just keep printing, you know, new tracks of different amplifiers that you're reamping through. This, you could do this with real amplifiers. I could just go and run into the room, print one, run into the room, switch the amp out, put the mic on the speaker. I wouldn't have to change any of the I/O, any of that stuff, and then just come back, create a new track, record the next amp. A little more work because it's real amps, but same concept. Hopefully that makes sense. And we'll talk more about hardware inserts further down the road, but hopefully that, at least the concept of it, makes sense. All right, so let's talk about software emulation. So software emulation you can open up just like a plugin. Here's Native Instruments, Guitar Rig. You can do stereo if you can do stereo effects and whatnot. And here you just do guitar amps, and they have, you know, common varieties. Here's Citrus, which I believe is emulating an orange amplifier. And you can just, you know, just like it was with the Kemper, kind of go through presets until you find one that you like and go, cool. The cool thing about software emulation is that I could actually just duplicate the track and then just change this up to blend. And then just keep duplicating it as opposed to, you know, having to, you know, reprint. And there you go. Like I said, you just got to be careful that you don't, you know, depending on how powerful your computer is, you might not have a problem, but the more guitar rigs you create, the harder it is on your computer. You can also freeze these tracks, print them. You know, there's a number of ways to get around that. And you can print them the same way via a bus if you want as the other one, but it kind of eliminates the need to print, which is pretty cool. As far as bass goes, lastly, it's the same as guitar. So I have the DI. I can just put a software plugin on it. Go to my bass amps here, be like, sweet. You know, find the what I want. Or, you know, I can do a hardware insert. Number 8, like usual, go over to my Kemper. And I have bass rig. So like that. All right. So So I can print that just like I did via a bus with new audio tracks, just like with a guitar, and layer it, do whatever I want. That simple. So hopefully that makes sense.